Okay, first, if you're going to ask a question, don't point at me and don't be disrespectful to me. I'm the mayor of this city, and treat me with the respect I deserve to be treated.
Ain't nothing changed, nothing new here to see. This ain't nothing but some political maneuvering.
America!
Welcome to the eulogy, eat it up. It's called political buffoonery.
Hey there everybody, Gene Berardelli back with another week in DUMBmocracy. So this is a video I actually know a little something about, being that it happens in the People's Republic of New York City. And it happens at a community meeting involving the mayor of the city of New York, Eric Adams. Not only do I know the players involved, but I know the feel of this meeting as well. This is a community meeting that was set up by the mayor's Office of Community Relations with people in the crowd that I'm going to point out what their motives are, why they're there. And you're going to hear some very caustic comments from Eric Adams, the mayor, in response to an angry voter. I know it's surprising to me too. Why would a politician get snippy at a voter? Well, let's see here. So this is a meeting that happened up in northern Manhattan. For those of you who don't know, we're talking about Washington Heights, Riverside, Edgecombe, Inwood, that area of Manhattan. Really as far north as you can get in the borough of Manhattan. And a question comes up regarding affordable housing. So let's get into the video. I'll start setting it up a little bit, and we'll get into it.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Diaz. I'm the chair for Community Board 12, your local community board.
Okay, so right now, let's set the stage with what is a community board? What does this mean? Who is this Catherine Diaz? So community boards are set up in New York City to be advisory boards on zoning, local zoning issues, any issues of concern in the neighborhood, the budget matters, things of that nature. And community boards are made up of citizens that are appointed to the board. So automatically, when you're talking about community boards, these are people who are either friends with or friendly with local politicians, the city council members, maybe the assembly members, people who are actively involved in their community, but also actively involved in politics. So the fact that this person is asking a question at this press conference, at this meeting with the mayor and his people, it tells me that this is a question that the mayor probably had planned to answer, or that his staff had advance notice about. I've set up meetings like this before in my neighborhood when I lived in Brooklyn in Sheepshead Bay. And I'll just say that there were plenty of planted questions that the mayor at the time, Mike Bloomberg, was aware of and ready to answer, had researched, as people had prepped him on. So this sounds to me like one of those canned questions.
And I sat at a table of educators. And so their question is, schools in this district have high numbers of families with housing insecurity, including asylum-seeking families. What are the pathways and structural supports being developed so that they can support themselves, their families, and live in dignity? Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is probably in the top 3 issues in our city right now. Housing, it keeps mixing between public safety, the asylum seekers, and housing. What is very important is for all of us to understand how we get housing. We are creatures of the state. The governor and I put in place an aggressive housing plan. Deputy Mayor Maria Torres Springer, we had a moonshot plan of 500,000 units of housing. We sent the legislation to Albany to get the extension in what's called 421A. That's an incentive to build. We wanted to build higher in those communities that traditionally. Okay, just give us a moment so we could ask those who rather have their voices heard and not your voice heard.
Okay, so as you see, there's going to be some ruckus at this meeting. And one of the people that is going to be interrupting the meeting, as you'll see later on in the video, is a woman by the name of Jeannie Dubnow. She is a housing advocate. She's been doing it for about 40 years. She also created a local civic association in the Riverside Edgecombe area of Manhattan. And as you'll see, she gets a little impatient with the canned questions, the canned responses, because obviously the mayor had a prepped answer for this question. So let's see what unfolds, shall we?
Salam alaikum, sister. And so we needed help from Albany this legislative session. They took no action at all on housing, none at all. Everyone agrees that it's a top issue for our city, but they took no action at all. We want to, who said I raised the rent?
So that's Miss Dub now answering, but not answering, but piping up right there. And when she talks about Eric Adams raising the rent, what she's really referring to is New York City's Rent Guidelines Board. They are in charge of levying down increases in rent for rent stabilized apartments, the rent controlled apartments in New York City. And Eric Adams, in this term, had appointed at least 2 new members of the Rent Guidelines Board that had just increased rent more than 3%, which is the most that it's been raised since Mayor Bloomberg, really. Just as an aside as well, I just want to point out that the gentleman sitting to the left of Eric Adams is someone that I've actually dealt with in the past in setting up some of these community meetings. His name is Fred Kreisman. He works for the community affairs outreach for the mayor's office and has done so for years. So if he's there, he probably had a hand in setting up this meeting for the mayor's office. And I'm guessing that the interruption by Miss Dub now was not part of the script. And honestly, folks, this sort of interruption is sort of near and dear to my heart personally, because before I got involved in politics, I was involved in a lot of community activism straight out of law school, mainly because my mother was one of these people that would get up at these meetings and interrupt politicians in the middle of their canned responses in order to get to the crux of a matter. And she would rub a lot of people the wrong way. And I was happy to do it with her along the way. So when I see Jeannie Dub now advocating for her position, regardless whether the position I agree with or not, I love seeing stuff like this. I love seeing community people getting involved and really sticking up for their advocacy, sticking up for, I don't want to say constituents, but for their neighbors, and trying to get to some real answers. And what Eric Adams here is, allows Jeannie Dubnow to be able to speak. By the way, Ms. Dubnow is not an ignorant woman. She's actually an assistant professor of biology at Rutgers, and she's been doing this sort of tenant advocacy work for, like I said, for over 40 years. Let's watch the exchange.
Ma'am, so I'm sorry, stand up for a moment. I have a 3-family house in Brooklyn. When my tenants moved in 15 years ago, I signed a lease with them that as long as you're in my property, you will never have an increase in your rent. For 15, let me finish, and then you can talk. Let me finish. Never. This is what I do know. Those 3 and 4 family houses, 8 family houses where people came to this country to buy a house, they are suffering right now. They're suffering. Fuel costs went up on them. Repairs went up on them. They are on the verge of losing their homes. If they lose their home, people will come in and purchase those homes and displace long-term tenants.
So Eric Adams is not making a bad point here, because as you all know from the pandemic, there was a moratorium on evictions and on rent payments and non-payment proceedings in New York City. So when he's talking about homeowners of 3 and 4 family homes, not necessarily the large commercial developments, feeling the hurt of the financial hurt of no changes in rent laws, and they're now in danger of losing their properties, it's a real concern. And if Eric Adams would have stuck with this answer, I probably would not be showing you this video. But here's why I am showing you the video.
So I think there was a 3% recommendation. I don't control the board. I make appointments. They make the decision. Everyone knows I don't control the board.
So Eric Adams doesn't control, quote unquote, the Rent Guidelines Board, the RGB. But as he does admit, he does appoint people to the board. And the latest increase that happened in April, Eric Adams is on record applauding the board for their actions. So he may not appoint them. He can certainly exert a little bit of control over them. He may not like control their vote, but he can certainly strongly suggest how to vote. He may not have them, absolute control over them, but I'm sure he has more than a little bit of influence being the mayor of the city of New York. But so there's a little bit of disingenuousness there. Let's see the response. Now, this is going to be a little hard to hear, but I'll try to get the volume up for you.
New York City, where the real estate is controlling you, Mr. Mayor, why are we having these horrible rent increases last year and this year?
So, Jeannie Dubnow brings up the point that in neighboring Nassau County, which is on Long Island, where, property value is probably a little bit higher, they had a 0% increase in rent from their rent board. But in New York, there's a 3% increase, and she's accusing Eric Adams of being in the pocket of real estate interests in New York City. Obviously, not a nice thing to say, and she's trying to advocate for her position and get her point across. Voters don't always act in the most appropriate way when confronting a politician, especially when they're angry about an issue. And a lot of these advocates, they do this, and politicians normally put up with it. They try to, de-escalate the situation. They try to explain their position. They normally don't do what Eric Adams does here, which is pitch a fit about being disrespected.
Okay, first, if you're going to ask a question, don't point at me and don't be disrespectful to me. I'm the mayor of this city, and treat me with the respect I deserve to be treated. I'm speaking.
Don't you know who I am, people? I am the mayor of the city of New York. You will respect me. Come on, really? Are we that thin-skinned here?
To you as an adult, don't stand in front like you treated someone that's on.
And of course, the crowd is applauding this because, again, as I pointed out at the beginning, the people that are in this room are probably there to support the mayor. The people, certainly from Community Board 12, are not going to bite the hand that feeds when it comes to going against the mayor and not supporting him. They're on the community board because they support their local politicians. And given that we're talking about, Washington Heights, Inwood, Edgecombe, that area, we're talking about a monolith of Democrats up there. So, of course, they're going to support Eric Adams and, by extension, support themselves, because if they go against the mayor publicly at a meeting like this, they're not going to be community board members for that much longer.
The plantation that you own. Give me the respect I deserve and engage in the conversation up here in Washington Heights. Treat me with the same level of respect I treat you. So don't.
Did you hear that comment about plantations? I'm going to try to get it back for a second here. See what we can get that back a little bit.
Don't stand in front like you treated someone that's on the plantation that you own. Give me.
Wow. Racist much? Going after an older, probably most likely liberal white woman, accusing her of treating him like she's an owner of a plantation? That's a little bit much, folks.
Give me the respect I deserve and engage in the conversation up here in Washington Heights. Treat me with the same level of respect I treat you. So don't be pointing at me. Don't be disrespectful to me. Speak with me as an adult, because I'm a grown man. I walked into this room as a grown man, and I'm going to walk out of this room as a grown man. I answered your question. Go to the next table.
And there you go. I'm a grown man. What does that mean? He definitely didn't answer her question. And while this is buffoonery enough in and of itself, this sort of angry, incredulous reaction that we've talked about in the past when we've discussed other buffoons, but he also does something that's probably more buffoonish than this. As if you can imagine something more buffoonish than this. Eric Adams is going to double down on this. Like what you see so far? Go ahead and smash that thumbs up button. Also, leave us a comment and tell us what you're thinking. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another show. So, later on Friday, I think it was, on the 30th, after this whole situation came to light in media, Eric Adams was given an opportunity on the local news station, 1010 Wins, WINS, to address what happened at this meeting to see if he wanted to soften his comments about the plantation and treating me like you're an owner of a plantation and going after this woman. And here's what he had to say.
I came from a family that my mom made it clear, never allow someone to be disrespectful to you. That woman disrupted a meeting where all the participants were acting respectfully and cordially to get their issues heard. She disrupted that, and then she was degrading on how she communicated with me. I'm not going to allow civil service to be disrespected, and I'm not going to be disrespected as the mayor of this city. I'm the representative of this city, and we need to start having a better dialogue on how we communicate with each other, both locally and nationally, on how we communicate.
Really? New Yorker, he's going to call out New Yorkers for being disrespectful. That's what being a New Yorker is pretty much about, isn't it? But more importantly, this is doubling down on a ridiculous statement that he made. He could have said, ma'am, please don't be disrespectful, don't point at me. He could have acted appropriately himself, but instead, he went to infer that this woman was acting like a slave owner. And by the way, a little point on Jeannie Dub now. And again, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. Her family actually fled the Nazis from, I think it was Belgium is what the story was. So she is a survivor, an immigrant who survived the Nazis and their takeover of Europe in the 40s. And he's now inferring, without knowing her, there's no way Eric Adams knew this, by the way, but inferring that this woman, again, a very intelligent woman, college professor, was treating him as if she was a plantation owner. This is complete and utter buffoonery. This is another example of a hot mess buffoon that we talk about in my book, Schnooks, Crooks, Liars, and Scoundrels, a field guide to identifying political buffoons, available now on Amazon and at Barnes & Nobles and other online bookstores, where they talk about an emotional response to try to get support. This is what Eric Adams did. There was an emotional response to the interruption of Jeannie Dub now, and all his sycophants responded, oh, yes, and would applaud and all that. But really, he was in the wrong for escalating the situation here. It's completely buffoonish for someone in a position of power to try to exert their power over the voters that put them in office by saying, don't you know who I am? You must respect me and all of this. No, Mr. Mayor, you have to respond to voters, even the ones that choose to disrespect you, even the ones that are angry, that are not pleased with you, that are not your sycophants, that are not your appointees on community boards, that are community leaders that are trying to advocate for their position. And by the way, folks, I'm not the only one saying this, and I know that I'm, right-leaning, conservative. I acknowledge that. I own it. Go look at what the Young Turks said about Eric Adams and his response here. Now, granted, they're coming from a position of Eric Adams being bad for siding with real estate interests. But at the same time, they acknowledge that when you are dealing with constituents, when you're doing constituent services at any level, it's probably not best to accuse them of being slave owners on a plantation. So that's what we got for this video, folks. Check back tomorrow. We're going to have some more stuff. about DUMBmocracy. Again, thanks to everybody who's been watching the videos. Please leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Am I off base? Did I leave something out about what you may know about these sort of community meetings? Definitely subscribe to the show. Leave comments. Share the video with your friends. Do all that good stuff. And I hope to see you back here tomorrow for another instance of DUMBmocracy in action.
All views and opinions expressed here are not necessarily of the mainstream media and may offend some listeners. It's called political buffoonery.